Mhm.
Okay, we are going to start. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to wait just another minute or so. I see more people popping in. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. We're going to be covering real estate. We're going to be covering divorce and your home. Oh, I am going to start the poll. So if you guys could take a couple minutes. Well, it won't take a couple minutes. Goodness, it's really a few moments, really. To fill out the poll, it just helps our presenters know more about your situation and things they should be covering. You also can put your questions into the Q&A during the webinar, and we'll do our best to address the questions by typing in answers or out loud at the end. And anything we can't get to, we'll make sure to follow up with you. So I'll just, yeah, get started. We still have people popping in, but I am Deanna Coyle, and I am one of the founders of Vesta, a new vision for divorce. And my passion for starting Vesta and for helping people is my own divorce that I went through that was very challenging. It was finalized around 14 years ago. I had young children at the time. I had no idea what to do. I went in, I hired an attorney who was fortunately an amazing attorney. And I didn't know about all the other resources that could have really helped me get through divorce in a much more efficient, smooth, less expensive way. So that is what Vesta provides. We've been doing these events for about 13 years now. And you are here with our Colorado Hub of Professionals. We started our Colorado Hub in January. So, gosh, this is our eighth webinar, and it's just been wonderful to have you all attend our events. I see some familiar names, and then we have some new people as well. Oh, I wanted to make sure, though, for everyone who is in Colorado, in the Denver area, we are having an in-person event. It's going to be in 2 weeks. It's going to be at 5:30, from 5:30 to 7. What's that? The 27th. Is that the 27th? Yes.
Mhm.
And it's going to be at Molly's office. So I will put, after we get started, I'll put a link to register if you haven't registered yet. It's a free event, and it's an opportunity to meet with the professionals, one-on-one. We're going to have, group time, and then there's time to meet individually with the professionals. And it's a divorce resource night, and it's something that was a really popular event when we started. When we were doing events in Massachusetts, is where we started doing these programs, as I mentioned, about 14 years ago. With COVID, we ended up moving our events to webinars, and webinars are amazing. It's a lot more convenient. You have, confidentiality, uh, but there's also something really special about getting to meet other people who are going through some similar things you've been through, and also, of course, meeting the professionals face to face. So we're going to get started now. A couple of things actually. First, uh, the concierge team, which includes me, will be reaching out to you after the webinar to see if you have any questions or if you need anything. If you want to speak with any of our professionals, I do always recommend taking advantage, if you haven't spoken with our professionals, to take advantage of having some one-on-one time, having a phone call to get your questions answered and to really see how they'd be able to help you. our professionals have all been through an extensive application. Well, it includes an application, a vetting process, because we look for professionals who are really good at what they do and also are kind and compassionate and understand what it's like, going through divorce. So they really get, what you're going through. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our professionals. If you guys want to, well, we'll start with Tina, and you guys can all introduce yourself, and then they're going to get started with the webinar.
If I can get unmuted. Hello, my name is Tina Huggins. I am a certified high conflict divorce and co-parenting coach, and I work throughout the US and in English speaking countries. So I can work with those of you who are in Utah, Florida, in any other state other than just Colorado, but I also work in Colorado. I'm originally from Colorado. Although I am not currently there, I am in South Carolina. And so all of my appointments with my clients are over Zoom. And I specialize in high conflict, specifically that with abuse. And I focus my work towards men as well as women. So I will turn this now over to Christopher.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks so much. And hello, everybody. My name is Christopher Anderson. I am the co-founder of New Leaf Family. It's a family law firm here in Colorado that was created uh, to do family law differently, and primarily to eliminate, first of all, the billable hour. So we meet our clients, and our fees are constructed in exactly the way they're used to paying for everything else. And even more importantly, we focus on your future and not the fight. And so I'm really glad to be on this webinar and the many webinars that we've done together with this team, because as a whole, that's what we're all about, right? That's what Tina and the folks you're about to meet are about, is really about your future. And so with that, I'll pass it on to Molly. I don't remember what order we're supposed to go in, but so Molly, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Christopher. Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Berger. I am the founder and CEO of Queen City Wealth. We're local in Denver, my hometown, partially named after, my business is partially named after Denver, the Queen City of the Plains. I don't know if anyone has ever heard that, but yeah.
Didn't know that.
Have learned that not a lot of people have heard that now that I've named my business that.
Yeah.
But I digress. We serve clients all over Colorado and all over the US. So sort of like Tina, we can help people across the country. We focus on comprehensive financial planning and general and wealth management, but I do have the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation. So as a CDFA, I can help specifically with divorce cases and running analysis on the financial settlement. So really helping people sort out the many times very complex financial piece of your divorce. And I'll pass it to Kristina.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. So nice to be with you all. I am a licensed mortgage professional here in Colorado, and my team is licensed all over the country. And really where I like to specialize, especially when we're trying to navigate big life transitions. I have been through that journey myself in navigating divorce, and I just realized how important it is to have people in your corner and professionals to really help you navigate big life transitions. And really my mission is to take out the overwhelm and the anxiety through the process, but really focusing on financial strategy and really diving into helping you navigate it and not letting it be so overwhelming. And, we're here to be your board of directors, your team to really help you navigate big life decisions like this. So, and with that, I will pass it on to Ethan.
Thanks, Kristina. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So I'm Ethan. I am a realtor at Orchard. I just actually transitioned to Orchard from Keller Williams, and it kind of ties into my philosophy as a realtor, specializing with helping clients going through divorce. Without getting too much in the weeds on why I made the transition, they just have a program that I think really helps people going through separation make a decision to either sell or move first. There's a program called Move First, and it really helps people that are in this situation where they have to sell and they want to be a homeowner and move to a new home. And the program helps unlock some of that equity, so you become a non-contingent buyer, which is very powerful in our Colorado market right now. But thank you for being here and attending this topic on keeping or selling the home. It's one question that has two very powerful sides, and we'll get into. But thank you for being here. And with that, I will push it on to Tina.
Oh, thank you, Ethan. So
Thank you.
it's a very difficult decision that we get to make. And when I introduced myself earlier, I told you that I was a certified high conflict divorce and co-parenting coach, but I'm also a restorative family mediator. And I work in the state of Colorado. I can't work in all of the states, but I do work in the state of Colorado. And so as we talk about the selling of the marital home, deciding to keep or sell that. So we've got the first thing, my clients, my female clients specifically, as moms, we are all consumed about the home. I mean, that's what we've done for our kids. We've created safety. We've created a home life in our home, right? So it's very difficult for us to see our children not living in our home. So it's very tough for us when it comes time to talk about the selling of our home. So I often talk to my clients about it being the home that, as and now I'm speaking as a child of divorce, it's the home that I remember my parents fighting in. I remember the yelling and the screaming in that home. And God, please find me a new home because I don't like this house. I remember thinking that. I've talked to both my siblings. We all three thought the same thing. We didn't want to have anything to do with that home because of all the fighting. So we were very happy when we all moved on and moved out of that house. But we've got to think about what's next. You know, the comfort, our house has been comfortable. We have it, you know, it's our home, it's our stuff that's all over. And then we've got the sentiment part of the home. It's where our children had their first birthday, their second birthday. It's where they started walking. I remember my baby sister walking in the kitchen, taking her very first steps. That's the sentiment. And yet I am still okay that that home is no longer in my family. And the emotional attachment, you know, it runs into all of this, the emotional attachment that we've got. In order to sell that home, we've got to break that emotional attachment. Emotions are what cause all of our problems. They're what causes the conflict. They're what causes our pain. It's all related to our emotions. And in order to make decisions in our divorce, in order to move forward, especially in the sale of the home, we have to let go of things in the emotional realm. Okay. So we also, all of us have fears, and that fear of the unknown, not knowing whether we're going to like the new place, if my kids are going to like the new place, all of that type of stuff, this new schools, you know, it's very scary for us. And it's also scary for your children, especially the younger they are and they're in school. And then we have our kids that are in middle school and high school, that they've developed their friends and they don't want to move away from their friends. And these are all things as we start looking at selling the home that we need to think about. And I recommend talking with your children about it. And then if you are going to buy a new home or rent a new home, I also recommend that you take the kids and get them involved, because that can become a family bonding, a parent or a father and children, a time to bond. You know, I remember my oldest son and I had to live in Fort Collins for a little while, and we had a great time. He was already an adult in the apartment that we shared together as an adult son and his mom living together. At that time, we were helping each other financially. He couldn't afford and I couldn't afford. As we all know, Colorado has gotten outrageous in our rent and mortgage area. And those types of things, we looked at the swimming pool, we looked at the fact it had a bowling alley inside because it was an apartment. It was just such a wonderful time. And I will never forget those memories that my oldest son and I made during that time. And then we get to that part where we're looking at different things. It's the financial strain, and that causes more fear, and that causes us to make many mistakes. I know firsthand mistakes that I've made in recent years just based on fear of not having enough to take care of me. And then, of course, we've got to worry about how we're getting from here to there. Our emotional life is upside down during divorce, and we literally start that healing process when we sell or make the decision to keep that home, and we let go of the fear of the finance, the fear of the new home, the fear of the what if. And then we've got, lots of little things that we're looking at. So again, we go back to these memories, and now we're looking at the good and the bad. I remember my siblings and I all remember the bad memories in that house. Yes, I remember my sister taking her first steps, but that wasn't anymore. That the house that we let go of in the hopes of moving to a house that had better memories, and there was no good memories in that house. And so we have those bad and good, and I've helped people come up with ideas. They can't afford new furniture, but you can afford a spray paint can and just spray paint things. I remember helping one of my cousins spray paint things with marble looking spray paint, just so that it was the colors that she wanted for her house, and it just recreated and gave a new facelift to her personal belongings, and just a whole new appearance in her life, which helped her in her emotional stability and growth and healing as she moved into her new home with her daughter. And so we've got different things. We've got the parts of when we move and how we're going to do that. Again, we want to look at the good parts of that, taking out all the emotion and moving the emotion from our decisions. I say that we marry with our heart, we fall in love, and it's all heart based, all emotional. But when we divorce, we need to divorce with our heads. We need to think straight. We need to be able to make positive decisions. And that's where this team of people come in. And I will tell you, yes, our lawyers are very important. Christopher is very important.
Very important.
Ethan is very important because he's the one that's going to help you stage and sell that home. But the one person that I urge you to talk to, it doesn't matter when, if you're going to try and buy or assume a loan, you need to talk to our mortgage person. The mortgage person can tell you everything you need to know about whether you're going to be able to make it or not. And Kristina is by far in this group of people, the one person that can tell you financially if you're going to be able to take on this loan and move to the next step. Doesn't mean you have to work with that mortgage person, with Kristina, because maybe you're going to keep the home. But if you don't know before you start moving in and having Christopher help you with your finalization paperwork, you can get through everything and it says you're going to buy a new home and you've got all of this place, and you get there and you can't qualify. So the one person that I tell you that you need to talk to is Kristina. And of course, Molly is going to be able to help you with all of the retirement aspects to be so that you can be able to get to there. But to take care of that fear, that's where we've got to come up with answers. And that's what this group of people is here for. And so, because Ethan's kind of in charge of this tonight, I'm going to turn it back over to Ethan. Okay, but you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that, Tina. I appreciate that. I didn't know I was in charge, so thank you. Uh, well, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, some of the things to consider just broad when we're talking about keeping or selling the home. Um, during the divorce, it's definitely a decision that's intertwined, with a lot of emotions and sadness and fear and anxiety. And these are the things that you probably want to consider when we're thinking about keeping the home. Is keeping the home going to create stability for you and more specifically, if there's children involved? Is it going to give comfort and continuity to whatever it is that you have going on, either in your life or the children's life? Is there sentimentality in this home? Has there been, a lot of memories that you don't really want to let go of, but you still want to be in that home separated? Um, and then obviously the fear of the unknown. And really, when you think about why you want to stay in the home, you got to think about what does it look like and how does it feel like to now own a home on your own? I think, some of that Tina had, kindly touched on some of the emotional aspects of it. But, when you think about staying in the home and if the other spouse was the one that handled, the upkeep, the maintenance, or the bills, I mean, those are all things that now you're going to have to consider that are now part of this I'm keeping the home thought process. Something like you or maybe a new partner or just you by yourself, you're going to have to take on all the bills and maintaining the property. Who's going to do the little things like snow removal, mowing the lawn, the landscaping, like things that have to get done on a somewhat frequent basis. Now you're going to have to think about how you're going to work that into your schedule. What happens if like the hot water breaks, or do you know, I would start figuring out like the ages of some of the major systems, like the roof, the furnace, the water heater. Is the foundation in good shape? All those things that maybe the other spouse might have handled, um, you know, in their honey-do list. Um, and then another thing is, how are you going to feel about living in the home alone, or 50% of the time when the children are gone, with the other parent? Are you going to be able to exist in that home while you're alone, or while the children or the kids are with the other spouse? Um, and then the last thing is, when you're deciding to keep the home, if you'd been in the home for a long time, is all of the memories attached to that home that were from that relationship, are they going to be able to be, okay, are you going to be okay with that, or do you prefer to move somewhere where you don't have that attachment to the property? Um, Now, some of the things that you're going to want to consider on the other side of it, if you and your spouse decided, yeah, we're just going to sell the home, um, is it going to create financial strain or money to put towards a new place to live? Is it going to hinder your emotional healing to sell the home? Uh, are you willing to let go of the memories, both good and bad? Is selling the home something that's going to align with you and the other spouse, or more specifically, you and your long-term goals and your financial reality? And would a new home possibly be that might be more affordable? Is that going to offer you more long-term peace and healing? And is it a necessary step to move forward? So I'm going to turn it over to Christopher, and he's going to tell you about some of the legal considerations to think about when, either keeping or selling the home.
Thank you, Ethan. And because newly family is different, um, when I talk about and confer with our clients, prospective clients, about legal considerations, and particularly with this question about what about the home to keep or sell. I do a lot of the things we talk about, some of the things that Tina and Ethan were talking about, but I want to review it now from the lawyer's perspective, and what we feel is the most important conversation we have with our clients, which is this. Because I think you actually heard, if when you were listening, Tina and Ethan had a slightly different perspective on what it means to keep the home and how important that is. And I think, from our clients, we see both of those perspectives for sure, and others. So rather than get focused, and I'm going to ask you, one thing I noticed here is that everybody that answered the poll on this call is married more than 10 years. Just a couple people less than 15 years. So all but two are more than 15 years. All but four of the people on this call are more than 20 years married. I'm going to bet that a lot of you have spent a lot of time in the marital home. And what was interesting too is that there's almost everybody has children, and of those, about half are minor children, and they've spent a lot of time in the home too. So here's what we do: we get out of the question completely. Do you want to sell the home, buy the home, do something else with the home? We don't talk about that at first at all, because when clients and like a lot of people on this call, I mean, like let me review the answers to the where you are right now. Only a couple of you are still in the consideration phase, and there's only a couple of you who are actually done with it. So everybody else, vast majority, are somewhere in the process. And I hope that you've had a chance to do what I'm about to suggest. But if you haven't, no time like now. For a minute, let go of what's happened. What your spouse did to you that's brought you here, or what you did, what you both did. What has happened in the past that have brought you to this place where your marriage of more than 10, for most of you, more than 20 years is ending? And get out of the present. Do we sell the house? Do we keep the house? How are we going to beat the other side in court? How are we going to win? Get out of all of that. And just for a minute, imagine your life 2 years from now, when all of this is done. The lawyers have done their job. The realtors have done their job. Your mortgage advisor, your financial specialist has done her job. If you've worked with a coach, she's done her job. Everybody's done. And it's you and your family. Where do you live now in your ideal world? Like, this is your chance to think about the things the way you want them to be, with no restrictions about what anybody else thinks about that, how you want them to be. What is your relationship like with your children? Where do they live? What's their relationship like with your spouse? What's your relationship like with your ex-spouse? What's your relationship like with your ex-spouse's parents and theirs with yours? Where do you work or go to school? What does it feel like on a Sunday morning in the spring when the sun has just come up and you're having your first cup of coffee? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you see? And literally take time after this call to think about that. When you had to take 15, take 30 minutes and think about those questions and more about your life 2 years from now, your ideal life. Because the truth is that most of us can make a lot of choices about that. And if we make that choice now, we then get to hold that as a razor, what we actually call our North Star or our Polaris with our clients. And every decision we make in the divorce, and every decision like this one, that this webinar is about, to sell or keep the family home, every decision we talk to our realtor about, our mortgage advisor about, our certified financial analyst about, our coach about, and our lawyer about, is all through that razor of, does this decision get me closer to that ideal life or not? Because a lot of the decisions that I see made in traditional family law circumstances, traditional divorces, that question's not asked. And a lot of decisions are made without that in mind. And then people wonder why at the end they got what they wanted in a divorce, but didn't get anywhere near to the life they want. So it's probably not the answer anybody was expecting when Ethan said, hey, tell me about the legal considerations. But that's where you got to start, because everything else flows from that. So in the topic, of to keep or sell the family home. What do you need to know? Well, first, please, you need to know about the future you want to build. But then you need to know some legal stuff too. You know, like Ethan said, and like Tina said, and I just noticed, by the way, it's Christopher, Kristina, and Tina. Like we're like mixing up the names. Um, you got to know your options. You got to know, and so like speaking to a good mortgage advisor, speaking to a certified divorce financial analyst, speaking to your realtor to know your options. And speaking to your lawyer to know your legal options is super important. So you understand things like when the divorce is finalized, if we have to bring it to a judge, how are things divided? It isn't equally. In Colorado, it's equitably. And equitable is not the same as equal, though many people think it is. Equitable means fair. And there are some circumstances that make it unfair to be 50-50, right? And what has happened, who contributed to certain assets, who wasted certain assets can go into that concern. When it comes to the house, here's the important one. A lot of people come and go like, but I'm not on the title. Or flip one, like we have a lot of prospective clients come to us go like, she's not even on the title or he's not even on the title. It's all me. And in Colorado specifically, and I think this is true in all states, that doesn't mean in the marriage who actually has a financial interest in that property. You may not be on the title, but if the house was bought during the marriage, that is a marital property and you have equal rights to it or equitable rights to it, I should say. We got to figure out what equity is. And that has factors in like what's been borrowed against it, but also, what other obligations go against the house. Then you've got to think about how you want to live during the divorce. And like I said, most of the people on this call are in the during the divorce phase. Ethan had some interesting things to say about, move first. And I think that that's a great opportunity and something, again, good to know your options. But there are consequences about moving out that you want to be thinking through and asking all these professionals about what that means, because what it means emotionally, what it means for the real estate, what it means for your mortgage situation, what it means for your financial situation, and of course, what it means for your legal situation. And there are so many options with that you should be thinking about, but always be thinking about all of them in the context of what's the life that I'm trying to build here. The last one is when to make decisions, right? I mentioned court, right? And that's what everybody thinks about divorce. Everybody, like, if you haven't been through it, that's where everybody's mind goes, is right to court. If you're of a certain age, like me, you remember like Divorce Court was a TV show in I think in the 70s and 80s, like, and maybe it's still going on. I don't watch TV much anymore. But people think about divorce equals court. And quite honestly, very seldom is that true, right? Close to 90% of the time, you may have some court involvement. And of course, a judge does sign off on the divorce and parenting plans. But if you do things the right way, you can minimize the chance of handing your entire future over to a judge who will take 3 to 6 hours to get to know you, 12 if you're really lucky, and then make these decisions on a life that you've lived for 10, 20, 30 years. You have the opportunity before that happens to resolve the situation in ways that keep you more in control of the outcome. Of course, the first one is direct negotiation, and with a good attorney on both sides, sometimes that can be effective. It is rarely effective without that, because you don't know what you don't know. And one of the sad things that comes to us a lot of the times is negotiated agreements that didn't include everything, and now we've got to unwind or fix things that had unintended consequences. If negotiations aren't fruitful, the other way to get things resolved is through mediation or mediations, because it is the last real opportunity for you and your spouse to come together with a neutral and come together preferably with your lawyers who can advise you about what to fight over and what not to fight over. Again, to keep you focused on your future and not the fight, and to not get hung up on things that you cannot change. and then have a neutral mediator who can push both sides and help to find common ground. And it doesn't, the cool thing that most people don't realize about mediation is it doesn't have to be on everything. You can mediate and resolve some things and then just preserve the things that you can't resolve for the court. Sometimes we can resolve the most important things, and it's actually the less important things that get hung up. This is a much less emotional way to go at it and a much less um, out out of control, right? Because once you hand it to a court, you're not in control. And in a mediation, at the end of the day, you don't have to agree to anything unless you want to. Unless it, again, how do we decide? Does it move you forward towards the life that you want to have 2 years from now? And so negotiation, mediation are the best ways to resolve it. But when to resolve your divorce situation, but when those fail, your attorneys can take you to court, and even in court, keep you focused on the future and not the fight. Their job is to be focused on the fight. Your job is to keep focused on your future and make sure that the decisions that are being made and the evidence that's being presented and the arguments that are being made all move you to that future. The topic today, of course, is how the decisions around your real estate, how your marital real estate affect that future. And again, I'm going to turn this back over to this amazing panel of folks. Ethan, since you're in charge, apparently, I'll turn it back to you, but you can, you can invoke everybody else that you want to talk about, because everybody understands, right? For most people, the real estate's the most valuable asset that they've got, and they need to be proactive about making these decisions. So, Ethan, if you'll take it away and help people understand their options a little bit better.
Well, before I move on, I actually had a couple of questions as they relate to the legal side of real estate, and maybe some questions that some of our viewers might have, maybe either legally or just as it relates to real estate. But in your course of working with clients, when there's a sale of an asset involved, the house, how does an appraisal help you in your process?
Well, a lot.
Does it help you?
Oh gosh, yes, because I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, Ethan, um, if we can take away the question of, well, what's it worth? That is, a huge, huge obstacle that people have to deal with, right? So having a third party appraiser, or sometimes two, right,
Yep.
to take a look, do the three methods of appraisal that you can talk about more competently than I can, so I'll let you. But
Not a licensed appraiser. I don't know.
yeah, but well, so I'll say them out loud and you can explain them. But so the people can do it by comps.
Yep.
People can do it by the oh gosh, now I'm forgetting the rental value. People can do
Oh
it
yeah.
by there's a variety of means to measure that. But at the end of the day, out comes a number that uses the real estate appraiser's knowledge of the community, knowledge of the real estate, investigation of the actual condition of the real estate, to come up with a number that establishes value. Is super important because there's so much conflict around that number. When you can get it resolved, then you've removed that conflict, and now you're just talking about an asset with a number on it.
Yep. Do you find that you have ever worked with clients that they're working with a realtor, the realtor gives what's called a CMA, a comparative market analysis, and then they present that to you as if like this is what the property's worth? Like what happens then, and why isn't a CMA good for you, I guess?
Well, I mean, so a CMA is not, I won't say it's not good, right? It's directional.
Or how is it
And
different?
yeah, but so let me take one step further back, because the actually most frequent thing that people are coming with is Zillow says, or Redfin says,
I didn't want to
uh,
bring that up.
yeah, that it's worth this. And then, but they don't want to pay for the appraisal. And so they come there and you go like, well, you know what? That's not even admissible. It's like, and Zillow uses computer algorithms. Zillow hasn't seen your house. Zillow hasn't seen the condition of it. Zillow isn't really aware of what's going on in that neighborhood. Zillow's got algorithms. And then so then they, yeah, to your point, the CMA, but that's just a comparative, that's just looking at it from one perspective. Again, CMAs usually also don't look at the condition of the house. CMAs just kind of do a little bit more than Zillow or Redfin and look at, okay, what's stuff been selling like around you? And then based on that, yours is worth this. Um, it's very, it's directional, right? You get an idea, but it's not concrete. And two CMAs could differ quite a bit. And so it
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
help to do the thing that I was talking about, which is remove this variable from the argument and come to a number. So a good professional real estate appraiser is going to use a lot more factors and a lot more knowledge and a lot more specific knowledge about this house in this neighborhood at this moment in time to give you a much better number. So yeah, that's the gold standard, Ethan.
So when your clients get an appraisal, is that then like that number goes into your paperwork and your documenting of who's getting what from that? Like, does that help determine,
It can, yeah.
what to
So
expect at the end of things?
yeah. So again, and the thing is, we don't have to take the appraisal it's not it doesn't come down chiseled on clay tablets at the base of a mountain, right? It's a number from a professional, and it is much more instructive than the CMA or than anything else. But then you can take other things into consideration, like what's it worth to me? What's it worth to the other side? But yes, that goes, when we figure out the total asset and debt analysis to figure out the distribution of property in the divorce, that number makes it much easier to calculate the whole shoot and match.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful. I hope that was helpful for people listening. Another thing that I think is switching gears from appraisals, um, is it easy to do a quick claim deed? How does the process of doing a quick claim deed, which is something that if you're planning on keeping the home, one of the person leaving the home is going to have to do what's called a quick claim deed, where they're basically signing off their right to own the property, but they're still on the mortgage, which Kristina can talk about how to like change that. But in terms of the quick claim deed, what does that look like? What does that process look like?
Well, so first of all, I appreciate you bringing it up. And so we're going to educate everybody on this call, is going to get a quick and good education in the word you used, because I would say about 60% of people that come to us think it's a quick claim deed,
Oh,
but it's a QUIT claim. You're quitting your claim
quitting it.
on the property, right? So a quick claim deed, yeah, it abandons your rights without affecting the rights of others to the home. So the banks don't get upset about it. The anybody else who has an interest in the house don't get upset about it. So it's a good way to convey your interest to the other parties holding interest of the home. It is something you definitely want to do with an attorney, because or at least have it reviewed by an attorney. Like a realtor can sometimes prepare it, but like you want to have it reviewed by an attorney, um, to make sure that it's the right circumstance. And quite honestly, you probably want to talk to someone like Christina, um, to make sure that your bank's not going to get upset about it, and that there's no provisions that suggest you shouldn't do that. So it's still something like a lot of people think like you just go and pull that off of one of the online form sites and just do one. And can be consequences. So yes, that's a good way to pass property away without affecting the banks. But you still want to get professional advice around that. Do not take this webinar as professional advice, please. And have advice that's tailored to your particular circumstances.
I guess I'll turn that same question over to Christina. So when people, they get a quick claim deed, they think, oh, well, now my spouse doesn't own this house, right? But as you know, they're still on the loan. So can you
Yeah.
kind of talk about what happens if they forget to do that, or how that process looks like?
Yeah, and I think it's also important, where sometimes it's to do this, to talk to people before you start making these decisions, right? Because, I have seen it to where people have come to me and they didn't really talk to any professionals before navigating divorce, and then they signed a quick claim deed, which is really taking their ownership off the table when it comes to title. But here's the thing is yes, let's say if both parties are on title, But they're also on the mortgage, and the mortgage, when you are on the mortgage, you are responsible for that debt. Therefore, that debt is reporting to your credit report. And so just because you sign a quitclaim deed to remove yourself, does not remove you from the mortgage, right? And so you're still going to have that mortgage on your credit. So really the way to go about it is to really, I mean, there's two ways you can assume the loan and go through the assumption process, which I can talk a little bit more about that later, or you can refinance, which you're going in and refinancing, and then you're taking over the mortgage, and then you're removing the other spouse from it. So it's just really, I've seen it happen a lot, and so which is why it's so important to talk to one of us to make sure you're not simply, because people have just printed off a quitclaim deed online and then they go and record it with a county, and then before they even go through the divorce process, and then now they're kind of stuck in this position where they remove them from title, right? And it's recorded. And so we just want to really make sure we're navigating that before any of those decisions are made ahead of time.
So I guess with the assumption, the appraisal kind of helps with that, right?
Yes,
Is
yeah.
it like if someone wants to assume a loan, they're going to have to get
Yes,
what's an appraisal, right? How does that
absolutely.
how does that help you keep someone in their home if the other person's deciding to stay?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's gonna be information, and it's gonna give us clarity as far as what the property is worth, right? Because until we don't have that, we can have a general idea. Both parties may have opinions, whether they're looking at Zillow or depending on where we're getting that information, right? So when we get an appraisal, which is done by a licensed appraiser, they have to go through government guidelines and regulation to really be able to draft that report and what is required, whether you do an assumption or a refinance. But that's really going to allow us to know, okay, what the property is worth, and then whether you're going in and assuming the mortgage, which meaning you work with the mortgage servicer. So whoever you're making your mortgage payments to monthly, that's who you're going to work with when you go in to assume the mortgage, meaning you're going to work with the servicer and you're going to be like, hey, we want to look at taking over this mortgage. You do still have to go through the qualification process, right? They have to make sure that you do qualify for the mortgage and that they can remove the other spouse. And so you do have to make sure that you do qualify for the mortgage. And then what is helpful about that, a distinction there though is assuming you're just assuming the original mortgage, right? So if there is a buyout, or if you are paying the other spouse with equity, we would need to do that on a refinance and not an assumption.
Okay. And to kind of, I guess, drill the point home, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like the worst things that could possibly happen if you forget to do the refinance. I've worked with someone in the past where they were in that same situation. They quit claim deed their house to the spouse who was
Yes.
living in
Yep.
it. They
Yep.
moved to Wyoming, and then, fast forward 5 years later, the
Mm-hmm.
spouse that was still living there forgot to, or I don't know if it was intentional or what, but the
Yeah.
property fell into foreclosure. And now that
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't own the property, but now his credit was going to take a hit because
Yeah.
now he has a foreclosure on his record. So I think it's important that if you're gonna stay in the house, quit claim deed, either refinance or assume, whichever one is a better option for you, just because you don't want to be financially responsible for something that you don't own, right?
Correct, especially 5 years down the road, and then you're hit with several mortgage rates, and that can be a really drastic impact to your credit, to where it can lower it tremendously. So you're still responsible for that debt, and we want to make sure that you're protecting yourself through that.
Well, I guess now that kind of would transition back into real estate. Thank you, panelists, for answering all those real estate related questions.
Thanks, Ethan.
So yeah. So the first thing that I'm gonna cover is just selling the home. Um, I think that's probably for some probably the easiest of the two, keeping or selling, or maybe the most challenging. But we'll start with selling. And when you're getting into that decision-making process with your spouse, you have to kind of sit down and talk about who's going to be the one to make the decisions. How are, whether it's to remodel something or clean something, or who's going to pay that bill that's late, or how are we going to, get the property ready? All those things are going to, best be put into like a list and a check of who's going to be doing what, because that way, at least then it can kind of quell some arguments. And as the real estate agent, it's always our job to, have equal communication to both sides, and usually best in a group chat and of, there's a showing today, can, if there's people living like in the house, can we coordinate the showing, or there's a repair that's going to happen, or the inspector's coming, all these different things that we'll need to have buy-in from both sides of the relationship in order to make the decision to sell the home and kind of assist you, whoever you work with. um Make sure that both spouses are understanding who has the authority to approve the pricing, the offers, the repairs, and other major decisions. As a realtor, I can make those decisions for you, and since both people are most likely going to be the owners of the property, we can't just go off of what one person's saying if the other person is saying something different. We have to, you're both our client, so we'll have to obey, but we can't really be loyal in our duties as your fiduciary agent to make those decisions if there isn't an agreement. So agreeing on the listing price together is important, and that's something that can be done either if the attorney orders the appraisal, we'll kind of go off the appraisal. Maybe it might be a little different based on market. Maybe you'll get a little more for it. And then the CMA, the comparative market analysis, which we mentioned a little bit before. It's not quite as rigorous as an appraisal. An appraisal is something that informs the mortgage lender of what they can loan on the property. A CMA is just based on similar comps that are very similar to your property within a certain radius. Um, you know, Beds, bath, features, size, lot size, all that to determine what an asking price would be. So that's a little different. They sound very similar, but a mortgage lender would, or an attorney would not use a CMA to determine that. Don't let disagreements about what the home is worth become another source of conflict. Definitely consider getting a professional evaluation or appraisal, either amongst you or with the help of your attorney and your financial advisor. Determine who's going to be getting what in the proceeds. What does that look like? Is there more than just the home? We're focusing today on the home, but business, assets, the couch, who's getting what, decide, who's going to be getting what during the contract of, the listing agreement. So exactly who's getting what, and then understand the costs of selling, things like, fixing the drywall that's been, messed up for a while, or, putting some coating on some paint, on the wall for some paint. Closing costs, commission, taxes, those are all things that you're going to have to consider. And a good agent or your title company can provide you with the net sheet, which would show you all those costs: mortgage payoff, lien payoffs, closing costs, taxes, and commissions. Um, Another thing to think about when selling the home is who's going to be paying for the repairs. Are you going to be paying for them 50-50? Is it going to be something where, you know, you have something worked out amongst you that someone's getting, paying for this versus paying the other one's paying for that? You're going to have to decide who's going to be doing that together. Decide in advance who's responsible for expenses that are needed to get the home ready for sale, whether it be your agent who takes on the cost of the marketing, the staging, and all that gets paid through their fee, or are those things that you're going to help out and do before you even talk to an agent and just get the house ready. And then lastly, is there anything in the home that is a little outdated and you think, and with the help of a realtor and maybe even a contractor, can determine, is this worth updating to get more out of my house sale? Things like, the kitchen and the bathroom. Those are the two areas that really add value to the home when you're talking about dollar for dollar remodeling and upkeep. Um, you know, Buyers don't necessarily care that you put a new coat of paint on the wall. They don't necessarily care that you just put in new carpet. Those things help, but if you find a buyer that doesn't really like carpet or doesn't like gray, it's a little bit harder to justify dollar for dollar cost versus, kitchen upgrade to more modern standards or a bathroom to more modern standards. And then another thing too to also keep in mind is just the major systems: furnace, water heater, roof, foundation. One thing that's really, common here in Colorado is radon. Does it have a radon system or not? That's something that a lot of buyers will hit a seller on for a few thousand just to get that installed if it doesn't have it. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, kind of moving on further down the list of the timeline in selling the home, um, you're going to want to create a schedule with your spouse for showings. Um, how are showings going to be handled? Will the property be occupied? Where are you both moved out? One person's moved out. So the agent and yourself will have to kind of go over, what does that look like? Times a day, days that work and don't work. Um, same thing with like open houses, pets, keeping the house clean. One thing to also keep in mind too during the sale process is if I'm a buyer, I'm going to go into a home and I'm going to try to figure out ways that I can get the price for less, for the home for less. When buyers can sense that the property is distressed, think like, a probate situation, like an estate, or, it's not in the best shape. It's, a lot more outdated, like 70s, 80s, 90s. Or in this specific case, there's a divorce happening that's forcing a sale. There's a sense that they get that there's urgency during those situations. So I would say try to do as much as you can in terms of cleaning and keeping the house in such a way that it doesn't look like two people are cohabitating on other sides of the building. It's something as small as the toothbrush, where the clothes are stored. You don't want them to pick up that there's, something going on in the house and that I'm going to now offer $50,000 less because I feel like they have to sell, not they want to sell. Um,
I got to tell you, Ethan, my understanding is that like avocado green and pink tubs are coming back in style. So, if you hold on to it and don't change it long enough, you never
it's coming
know.
back.
Comes
It's coming
back.
back. I'm hoping shag carpet and wood paneling comes back, but that's just me. Uh, yeah, I mean, you really got to think like is when you're getting the house ready, is it worth putting that coat of paint on? I would consult like a realtor of what's hot in your neighborhood, like what are they seeing in newer homes, and kind of factor that in. If unless there's damage, of course, like if there's damage, mold, leaks, like things like that you want to fix, but like just cosmetics, I would definitely consult, either a general contractor or remodeling expert, kind of see what they're doing and what they're seeing in the marketplace. Um, and then a good agent, the company that I'm moving to, Orchard, and other agents out there, if I would ask them, do you have like a remodeling company that has flexible financing options? Because there are specific remodeling companies out there that are okay with being paid at closing, and they have their finger on the pulse when it comes to what's popular, what are people seeing a return on investment in terms of remodeling. So just my 2 cents. Um, so then I guess now we're done talking about that, um, you know, protecting the belongings, creating a showing schedule, deciding who's getting what, furniture, artwork, electronics. Um, Now it's like thinking about where you'll live afterward. If you're going to sell the home, are you going to go back into, being a homeowner and some downsizing to something smaller, or are you going to go to renting? And there's really no shame in either. Both of them are perfectly good options. There's just a little bit of nuance in terms of buying a home, what you qualify for. Are you contingent, which kind of ties into that Move First program that I mentioned earlier. The program itself unlocks some equity in the home, and you use that as a down payment on the next house. With it being, in a separation situation, you'd have to determine if that equity that you use for that down payment is within the amount that you've decided that each person is getting. So that's something to keep in mind with that. Um, And then consider the timing of the sale. The fastest sale isn't always the most profitable, and you're going to want to discuss whether or not you need to sell quickly or whether you can afford to wait for the right offer. Be prepared for emotional attachment to the home. It's very easy to get attached to the home that you've lived in for years and years and years, but don't let that hinder the sale. If you have to sell, and it's something that both sides have agreed to. It's very easy to become attached, but just know that people that are coming into the space don't necessarily have that attachment. So, you got to take everything that like a feedback that buyers may have, not too personally. Selling the home can be difficult, especially when there's children or many years of memories are involved. Don't let emotions alone determine the financial decisions of the sale. Speaking on children, I think it's important also when thinking about selling the home to consider the children's needs. Um, is the sale going to mess up their school year? Is the sale going to happen during a break? Well, what does that look like? And how are you considering them in that decision making process? And then, when you're thinking about buying in a new area, one, is it in your price range? But two, like what are the school districts that that you're going to need to be in and look around? What are the commute times to work and to school? Custody schedules, if there is one set up, and how is that going to work when thinking about moving? And then until the home sells and the loan is paid off, both spouses may remain responsible for the mortgage, even if, as we said, one spouse has moved out. Um, just a few more points on selling the home. Any decision that you guys have come together to make, I would say to have your attorney review if you're unsure if one side is doing it equitably and fairly. Your real estate agent can guide you through the sale, but your divorce attorney should advise you on ownership, asset division, court orders, and how proceeds should be distributed. And then I think if you're going to go with selling the home as an option, it might be advantageous to you to not hire the family realtor, not hire the uncle, the brother, the cousin, the one that you have in your family, because it is a very sensitive time. And during this transaction, it's one of the most important transactions of anybody's life. And now, when you add on top of it, um, all the stress, the emotional attachment, all the trauma that's involved with the separation, it might be advantageous to have an outside third party that doesn't have ties to the family. It isn't going to judge, and you obviously don't want to let things get ugly or even have them know too much of your business if that's something that you're not comfortable with. Um, when you're selling a home with either one or two people, both of them are your clients, and the thing that adds on top of the emotional side of the transaction when there's divorce involved is that you're kind of working with two sellers individually that have competing interests and heightened emotions. So it's if you're working with an agent who doesn't necessarily have that experience of working with people that they're seeing at this time of life, it might be worth seeking out a specialist. And then one thing to remember as well, this is the last point for selling the home, but the goal isn't simply to sell the house. It is to get both spouses through the transaction with as little additional conflict as possible while protecting their financial interests. So switching gears to keeping the home, um, there are some things that you're going to want to consider. We touched a little bit on it with Christopher and Kristina, but can you afford it? You're going to definitely want to talk to Kristina about, seeing if you qualify for the house. You're kind of coming in, even though you might have lived there for 10 or 15 years, if there's still a mortgage that's to be paid, you're almost coming in as a new buyer. And so, you know, if the other spouse was the breadwinner, or if, it was 50-50, are you going to be able to take on now 100%? And so Kristina and other mortgage advisors will be able to kind of help review your qualifications, to see if you're going to have to either, assume it or if you can afford it. And what do those look like for you? And, one of the things that you got to keep in mind too is if you get a pre-approval to, let's say, 350,000 and the house has about 330,000, we don't want you to be so close to your approval limit that now you're house poor and you can't afford, the other bills, your kids, your groceries, all the other things in life. So, that's another thing to keep in mind too. Um, we already touched on the refinancing of the mortgage. Again, just to reiterate, if someone's going to stay in the home, refinance the house as well as do the quitclaim deed. And I know right now, for a lot of people, the interest rate's really scary, but you know, that's really the only way that they can remove financial responsibility from the home is doing a refinance or an assumption. But there are ways of getting their interest rates down, and I can help. Kristina will help talk about that and kind of what she's seeing right now in the market. Um, Molly, do you think you could talk a little bit about like some of the capital gains tax consequences and some of the tax implications of keeping the home?
Sure. Happy to. So capital gains on your primary home, the amount that you can owe can differ greatly if you're married or not in terms of how you're filing your taxes. So it can be something that it's like a really key part of figuring out in a divorce situation. If one of the spouses is going to end up keeping the house and in the future sell it, that cap gains like bill could be a lot different. So the way that it works, high level rules are there is an exemption of $250,000 per person. So if you're married, filing your taxes jointly, then both of you get that. And so your exemption amount is $500,000. And this is on the gain of the house. So this has nothing to do with the mortgage balance, right? How much you owe, which is like a just common confusion point when we're talking about cap gains on a property. So what we do is take the basis, or usually what you purchase the property for, that price, and then what are you selling it for? And that's the gain. So again, if you owe mortgage right in between those two numbers, then that's not part of the calculation. If this gain amount is more than $250,000 or $500,000, that's the piece that gets excluded. So based on how who you are, if you're married or not, how you're filing. And so if your gain is a large gain, right, you've maybe owned your property a really long time, right? It's in Colorado and has appreciated a lot. You could owe capital gains on that excess gain amount, right? Above and beyond the exclusion amount. And then obviously if you're married, right, you get a $500,000 gain. But if you're single, when you sell, you get a $250,000 gain. So could be quite a big difference in that future tax bill. So something that we just always want people to understand, be aware of, right? If you're the one who's hoping to keep the family home, in the divorce and say, hey, in the future, I could sell it and it'll be worth so much, that you could be signing yourself up for just a bigger tax bill, right? That you would likely be responsible for the majority of, right? Or all of it. It can be part of the negotiation of your divorce too, like knowing that, that future tax bill could be different. So, keep that in mind too, but it's something that could be a really large number. So we don't want to just like forget about it or be unaware of it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Molly. Like those numbers you just said, 250 and 500, those were set in 1997.
Yeah.
They are not indexed to inflation.
Yeah.
That used to be like all the capital gains you could possibly expect in your
Yeah. Like you
home.
couldn't even think of bigger numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Mhm.
now, like, wow, it's
Mhm.
just really not. So the capital gains has become really important. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to pass back to you, Molly, if you can answer this. Like, um, because we talked about quick claim deeds before. Does that reset the basis or is that carried through?
Doesn't reset the basis.
Right. So
Yeah. So
whatever.
you can't just like get out of your tax bill some way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it's really important. I just want to like drive the point home that you said. It's like all of a sudden you're married, you've got this $500,000 exemption in capital gains.
Mhm.
So if your house sells for $500,000 more than you bought it or less, like you've got no capital gains, no tax.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, boom, you're down to 250.
Yeah.
$250,000 of capital gains is just risen from the earth.
Yeah.
And you have to be really careful about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like, keep in mind the timing. Work with a lot of people that, like, as we've already covered, the marital home is often the biggest kind of piece of a divorce. Like, it might be the biggest asset on your balance sheet, might be the biggest kind of issue emotionally, right? Somebody, it's super, super important for them to keep the house, right? That's their biggest kind of wish. Um, we see a lot that people are like, well, I just want to keep the house that my kids are used to and I'll sell it when they graduate. Well, what if they're graduating in a year, right? Or 2 years, right? If it's a short time frame, then you fought so hard and maybe gave up a lot of other assets in order to keep the home, and then you go sell it in a short amount of time, and now you have an even bigger tax bill, right, than you were expecting. So just one of those things that, again, we want to be like aware of, and of course, as long as you're aware of it and like know what's coming, you can agree to that. But something that gets missed easily and is often confused with a mortgage balance or the equity in a home. So equity is not the same as what the cap gain could be based on. So, and a lot of people feel that's unfair, I guess, but in the IRS's eyes, like, everyone could just go refi their house up to the, very max, right? And have a mortgage at the highest level and then go sell it and be suddenly, oh, I don't owe any taxes. Well, IRS don't work that way.
No, but conversely, and I've seen this, right? Let's say you have refied it and your mortgage is up there.
Yeah.
And then when you sell it, you only get 50,000 out of the sale on
Yeah.
it. But you bought it when the house was worth $600,000 less.
Mhm.
Like, you might be facing a tax bill bigger than the money you got out of the sale.
Then, oh yeah. Oh, I've seen it many times.
Yeah.
And people are very like, but I'm not making any money. I'm like, because they've refied a bunch of times, right? And
Mhm.
they've owned the property for decades. So it's a huge gain because they've owned it a long time, but they keep refining. I'm like, well, you made money by refinancing and pocketing that money at some point, right? Even though you have to go pay off the mortgage now that you're selling the property, you might not feel like, there's any proceeds now, or yes, your tax bill could be bigger than the proceeds at that time. So yeah.
Well, I actually have a little bit of a knowledge nugget that you kind of remind me of. It's related to tax, but it's property tax, and I think it's a little interesting nugget that maybe
Mhm.
some of our viewers might find helpful. Is once you start getting to the retirement age, if you've been in the property long enough, it's 60 years old, and you have to have lived in the home for 10 years in order to get that senior tax benefit. When you think about selling a home and moving to a new one, just because you're over that age on the new one does not mean you're going to have those same property tax benefits. The caveat is that it not only you over that certain age, and that age does change based on the county and where you're at. Same thing with how long you've lived there. On average, what I'm seeing is 60 years old with 10 years of living in the home. So that's something to think about too when you're thinking about selling it is, are you still going to be able to get that property tax benefit? We're getting close to time, but I just have one last little point to make about keeping the home. When you just if you decide to keep the home and you're going to be living in it and the spouse is moving out, and if that person was responsible for all the maintenance, treat that home purchase as if you're a new buyer coming in. Go through all of the steps that you're going to take if you're just going to buy a new home. So talk to Kristina to see if you can afford it, and if you can afford it, now you're gonna want to get an inspection on the house because I want you to make a decision about the house that as if you don't know what's going on with it, almost like buying a used car. Like you're gonna want to get an inspection. You're gonna want to see like all the major things that might be wrong with it and factor that into your financial, you know, am I going to be able to afford the home? If your roof is 15, 18 years old, it's probably going to be due soon for a new roof. Is your water heater, 10, 12 years old? It's probably going to be due soon for another water heater. So, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Christina and she can kind of go over some of the nuances of assumptions, refinances, and maybe even some asset type loans.
Awesome. Thank you, Ethan. And yeah,
Thank you.
I just loved you kind of making a point that it's so much more than just owning the home, right? It's maintaining the property, it's taking care of it, and really kind of considering all the work that needs to go into the home, and what it would take to get there. So thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I would love to just kind of just dive into, kind of some questions that we all have when it comes to qualifying for the mortgage. And when you are navigating this process is, can you buy the spouse out? Do you have to sell? Can you assume the mortgage? Can you co-own for a while? And so, keeping the home, some things to think about is, can you qualify for, and are you comfortable making the mortgage payment on your own? That's really important to kind of factor in when we are looking at that for you. And then also breaking out, buying your spouse out. So determining their share of the equity and whether a refinance can help fund the buyout. Assuming the mortgage. So some loans are assumable. It's going to be dependent on the type of loan that you're in. And also what's nice about assuming a mortgage is you're just going in assuming the mortgage that you have currently. And you work with your mortgage servicer, as I mentioned previously. And what can be really helpful with an assumption is it allows you to keep the existing rate and term that is on that current mortgage. Whereas if you refinance, you're going to refinance at today's interest rates and qualifying for that mortgage today. Another thing to consider is co-owning temporarily. So really understanding who will pay the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance. And to kind of, I know we briefly touched on this a little bit, is, identifying what will matter is like who is on title and who is on the mortgage. And so really kind of making sure that you take the proper steps with that. In title, who owns the mortgage, and then the mortgage is, you are responsible for that debt. And so a quitclaim deed is going to really change the ownership, but it does not remove somebody from the mortgage. And so to kind of really summarize that, it's just sometimes keeping the home is the best decision. And sometimes selling can create more financial freedom, and really every situation is going to be different. To touch on just division of assets, your house is one of the biggest. And so you need evaluation. And we talked about that, kind of talking about a comparative market analysis, which is what a realtor provides. And that's going to kind of pull all of the recent sales and data to kind of give you an estimate of what your home is worth. And then we, as a lender, will require an appraisal when you do go through the refinance or assumption process. And so that appraisal is really going to tell us what exactly that is for to determine the market value, and really give us that information when we are looking at qualifying you for a mortgage. Now to touch on qualifying. So qualifying for a mortgage is once we really know or have an idea of what the home is worth, right? That's going to really kind of tell us how we need to split the equity in the home. So if your spouse is, wanting to keep the home, you have to make sure that you do qualify for that mortgage. And so really talking to, everybody here ahead of this and really staying ahead of it, is talking to a mortgage lender early, and also talking to a realtor, Ethan, just so we can kind of help guide you and give you the knowledge that you need to really make the decisions, and making sure that you qualify for the mortgage, right? Making sure that you are within a payment that you're comfortable making, and that it is realistic for you. And that's really what's going to, when we go through that process, that's kind of the clarity that we can give you. Some things to touch on just with credit, because that's a big one, right? When you're navigating divorce, and if you share debts and things are reporting to credit, we want to make sure that you maintain a good credit score no matter what. And so a credit score, I would say, in qualifications, we can go as low as a 580 credit score, but ideally, if we can get you up to that 620 credit score. And we just want to make sure that you don't close any accounts. Closing accounts can actually hinder your credit score. You want to make sure you're paying everything on time, but really knowing what debts are in your name, especially during a divorce, right? I've seen this happen a lot with clients where everybody will just stop paying on debts. And then what we start to see is that credit score get really impacted and it drastically lowers. And then kind of the issue with that is then you're trying to qualify for a mortgage, but your credit score is too low. So during a divorce, just making sure you're monitoring all of the accounts, especially the ones that are joint, making sure you're paying it on time, and make sure the mortgage and debts stay current. To touch on income, so this is always really good to know is income. We can use child support and alimony to help you qualify. So we can use that income to help you qualify on the mortgage. And then we'll require some documentation within that, especially the documents that you get navigating through the divorce process. And something that I did want to touch on also is outside of using alimony and child support and separate maintenance for income. We're all going to have unique situations, and depending on if you are a business owner or if you have a large amount in assets, we can use, specifically if you have assets, we can use those assets to be able to qualify for a home loan. Another thing to consider is if you are a business owner, I run into this a lot. If you are self-employed, there's going to be a lot of nuances when it comes to qualifying for a mortgage versus if you are a W-2 employee. So just some things to really kind of keep in mind there. And again, depending on your situation, can always kind of give you guidance around that and kind of help you navigate it. All right, which kind of leads me into, what is a buyout? And how do you calculate equity? I think this is a really important thing to touch on is, let's say your house is worth $500,000 and let's say you owe $300,000. Okay. So your mortgage, you owe $300,000. And let's say your equity, your home has appreciated in $200,000. So you have about $200,000 in equity in the home. How is that equity split 50-50? So let's say you may owe your spouse an additional $100,000, right? It can come from any asset, but let's say specifically for the mortgage is, let's say if you owe $300,000 and then you need to pay off the spouse. And so you're going to stack on $100,000 on top of that. And so your new loan would be for $400,000. And so that's what we would look at in terms of qualifying you when we do go through that process. And to touch on just refinances or assumption, I kind of talked about that earlier. A refinance, obviously we're refinancing the existing mortgage where you're assuming the current mortgage, we're keeping the rate, the interest rate and the terms the same. Versus if we do potentially look at refinancing, we're going to refinancing you at today's interest rates and making sure that you do qualify for that mortgage. And so really to kind of navigate this process, it's just always essential is making sure you're talking to us early, especially Ethan and I, to where we can just kind of help guide you and give you information so you can make sure you're making the right choices as you navigate this process as well. All right. And then I think besides that, that's about all I have. And we kind of want to touch on some financial considerations, which I think I will allow Molly to take over.
Thank you. I know we're really close on time and we
Yes.
usually like to have like a few minutes for any just like other questions that pop up. So I think we've done a good job of actually touching on a lot of the other financial considerations, but things to keep in mind, right? If you are really trying to come out of your divorce owning your home, like, can you afford it? Not only the mortgage payment, whatever that's going to be, but also taxes, insurance, any of the future costs that's associated with the home. Do you want to be the one mowing the lawn or fixing the toilet or any of that stuff? What are you kind of giving up if in terms of an equalization, right? If you're coming out of the divorce with the home in terms of other assets, right? So are you giving up retirement assets or just liquidity, right? And other types of assets too. So something that I always want people to keep in mind that we don't want to have usually have like no liquid dollars at all. like in lieu of keeping the home or being the one to win the home. Maybe you don't want to never retire because you were the one who won the home. So just keep in mind kind of what future implications, right? Or costs you're paying by keeping the home. Or vice versa too. And then market conditions and timing. I mean, we hope, of course, that real estate continues to go up in value, but that's not a guarantee. So if you're kind of banking everything in terms of like your divorce settlement on this real estate will be worth more every year, that can just be a huge kind of miss, right, in your overall settlement. It's just because we've experienced that in recent years, right, or decades in Colorado doesn't mean it's a guarantee that your home's worth more in the future. So just keep that in mind, right, or have as like a factor, right, that you're considering. And then we talked a lot about the different tax implications, of course, with capital gains and then property tax too attached to that. So most places, right, property taxes are gonna keep going up too. So know that that could be like an increasing expense attached to the house that, right, you're signing up to be the one to pay. If you're the one who, comes out of the divorce owning the home. Tina, if you had any other kind of wrap up comments, otherwise I know we're right at the end of our time. So if there's any just open questions from the attendees too, we could take those.
Yeah, again, if you have questions or anything, just real quick, drop them into the Q&A session so that they can be answered. And I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight. And I hope we were able to give you some information that helped. Lastly, we talk about our emotions a lot here in the connection, especially with selling the house. So thriving versus surviving. We want to get ourselves out of survival mode. We want to work on things. And if talking to a therapist can help, I do highly recommend that. In the case with my client, sometimes the therapist and I work together to keep our client into the thriving as opposed to the striving. So I just want to again thank all of you for coming and thank the panelists for being here and supporting all of the people that come in and have all these questions. So I will turn it back over to Deanna.
I say this every time. Well, first of all, I'm just so blessed to be working with all of you amazing professionals. You can tell like your knowledge and just how much you care and that you just don't like do surface level. Like you dig deeper and just the holistic way that you all look at things. And to our attendees, thank you so much. Professionals, you did an amazing job answering questions in the Q&A.
There were so many. It was great.
There were a lot. I love to see, the interactive, just our attendees asking questions, showing their gratitude. We do have more people on now than at the very beginning. I want to mention again for anyone that lives in the Denver area, please join us on August 27th. I'm telling you, our in-person events there's just something so magical about them. And we rarely host them. So please come if you can. And yeah, and anything else from the professionals before we say goodbye? Our next event or next webinar is going to be Finding Hidden Assets in Divorce. And that is one of our more popular webinars. I think whether there are hidden assets or not, a lot of people, especially there might be mistrust, right? Like want to just make sure. So there's going to be some really good information and that's going to be on, it's the events, unless there's our webinars, unless it's like Christmas, like, oh, actually, no, because you're still early in the month. So you don't really get impacted by the Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays. So our webinars are the second Thursday of the month at 5:30. So please join us then. Anything else from our professionals before we say goodbye?
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
Thank you
Please
so
feel
much
free
for
to reach
joining us. Thank you,
you.
professionals, for the amazing information. I do learn every time. Every time I learn new things, there's just so many nuances.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, and another question. Oh, that it disappeared.
It was more a comment saying
Ah,
thank you.
okay. I love the comments too. The
Yeah.
comments are good. But yeah, this was just, yeah, so informative. All right. So if you guys want to stay on a couple minutes,